Cambodia's beautiful temples and dark history attract tourists from across the world. But many of today's holidaymakers want to do more than just sightsee, with a growing number volunteering their services for free. But critics are questioning their effectiveness. I'm Fauzia Ibrahim. On this edition of 101 East, we ask if volunteer tourism is actually hurting the very people it's supposed to be helping.
I love volunteering because helping people makes me feel grateful for what I have.
I want to share my knowledge with Cambodia because by coming here we can make a difference.
I love volunteering because it gives me a sense of fulfillment.
You get to meet so many beautiful people and it's rewarding. It's given me a new lease on life.
I love volunteering because I want to make a difference.
Best thing, the kids and people you work with.
Bonnie, Maya and Erin are volunteers working as unpaid English teachers in Cambodia for several months. None of them have official qualifications, but all did volunteer work at home.
In a way, we are being selfish by coming here because we want to be able to develop from this. But at the same time, I think if you're going to be selfish about something, being selfish by helping others is a pretty good way to do it.
Even though it's only a small part, it all adds up in the end. Like, I'm only here for 3 months, but then so many other people come for 3 months. So in a year, one kid will get really good English lessons because of the amount of volunteers, and I think that's really beneficial.
The girls have taken time out since completing high school, saying this is their chance to see the world and make a difference.
I feel like volunteering, you get a reward that you don't get from anything else. There's not enough money in the world that could give me the same feeling I get when I see these kids' faces running up to me.
Today, volunteer tourism is a booming industry, with more and more people wanting to combine holidays with giving back to the communities they visit.
We work 5 days a week here, but then on weekends we go out and travel around Cambodia. While volunteering is our priority here and it's our prime aim to do, you also choose a place that you want to see.
We eat street food, we sit with the locals at Drink Mon at night, we take motos and tuk-tuks to work, so it's kind of like that. So I wouldn't consider myself a tourist, even though I know I am. I'd just say I live as a volunteer.
Our experiences may not be day-to-day as exciting as a tourist because we don't go out and look at all the attractions, but at the same time it's more just a homegrown, just local experience.
But not everyone agrees that volunteer tourists have a positive impact.
We appreciate that they're doing this for the best of motives, but they're not really helping to resolve the situation. They are actually, by providing support to institutions that should not exist, they are exacerbating the situation.
Richard Bridle from UNICEF says the number of orphans in Cambodia is the lowest in decades, but the number of orphanages keeps increasing. Escaping lives of poverty and abuse, more than 80% of today's Cambodian orphans have at least one parent.
We would actually like to see most of these institutions gradually closing down. They are not serving a function to care for children who've lost their parents.
UNICEF has been working closely with the Cambodian government and other international aid organizations to establish a national social protection system. Part of this involves a government audit into the 269 officially registered orphanages in Cambodia.
Based on my observation, most of the orphanages that we have studied have the children's well-being at heart. Only a few are using children to make money, and we are investigating those. In Cambodia, we do not want to encourage an increase in these centers. Instead, We want to work on providing services for the whole family and community instead.
Anyone who works in any childcare institution should have proper training. It's not something that you can just do as an amateur. They ought to be concerned that these children will get attached to them and they're going to leave. And that's not really in the best interests of the child.
Former Hollywood executive Scott Neeson knows all about attachment. He came to visit Cambodia 9 years ago and can't leave. He sold his yacht and his luxury car and used the money to open up this childcare centre. Scott says although he understands the desire of volunteers to help, unless they have specific skills they can pass on, such as medical training, he is unwilling to take them on.
It doesn't work. We have to protect the children, both emotionally and physically. We have very strong child protection policies. We require police reports in advance and references. It's not worth the time of either the volunteer or CCF to go through that for a couple of days. I don't believe in the concept of come and hug a child and speak some English. We have no tolerance for that at all.
And Scott says he's had some bad experiences with volunteers.
One, they're not reliable. They may turn up the first day. If they don't like it, they won't turn up the second. And secondly, there's often a difference of opinion on what the attitude should be. We are running a very serious operation. What we do is important in our eyes. It's a serious priority. Whereas a lot of those who are on temporary visits, backpacking, don't believe they're doing us a favour by actually being there, and there's often a bit of friction.
He prefers to empower local people and has more than 300 Cambodian women working on various projects. But he does sympathise with volunteers who are disappointed by the experience.
They're arriving here after spending a lot of money, thousands of dollars or thousands of pounds, to get a good volunteer position, and they arrive here and there's no resources. The job's not what they were told. There's no one to help them acclimatise, no briefing, and I'm surprised by the rate it's happening, even with the larger, more respected volunteer organisations.
I paid almost $4,000 for 3 months to come here.
Was it worth it?
No. Because I don't know where that money went. Because when I look at our housing, when I look at the amount our staff is making, when I look at how much goes to the orphanage, it doesn't add up. Even with insurance and other things they claim it goes to, I just don't see it. And I would have much rather donated that money directly to the orphanage.
You've really got to be careful. I mean, a lot of them, it's not just they're dodgy in terms of how they make their money. They'll bleed volunteers for money, saying they don't have enough food for the children, they don't have sufficient schooling, and a lot of it's just nonsense. There are several organisations around here that take whatever's donated and sell it.
But volunteer organisations like the Dutch group Pure say not all the money volunteers pay can go to the orphanages and schools they work with.
You pay a fee, it's $900 for 4 weeks. It's not that we get rich from it, because the fee that we require, it's for the training in the Netherlands, it's some administration costs in the Netherlands, it's the accommodation costs here, transport to the project. We have a volunteer coordinator who gets some reimbursement for food and telephone expenses, which is more or less it. But there's a donation to the project, of course, and all in all, this is the fee that we ask.
Some foreign tourists spend their time helping former monk Chiang Pala, who runs 8 schools outside Siem Reap. Over the past few years, organisations have sent him more than 60 volunteers. Although happy to receive the extra help, he was upset to discover the organisations charged the volunteers a fee, but didn't pass any of the money on to his schools.
They didn't tell us how much they charged the volunteers, and of course we didn't get anything. It was the volunteers who told us they had paid money to the organizations.
Pure has now agreed to give Palace schools a donation of $50 per volunteer. Other organizations say it's enough that they provide the volunteers.
It's a small amount that we directly give to the project, and we do this because in Cambodia there are many good projects, but also many a little bit less projects. And to give big money amounts, our experience is that this doesn't always work well. Even if the project coordinator of the partner project is a good person and really loves his project and the kids, giving a very high amount of money to a Cambodian person doesn't sometimes work out.
When volunteers come here, the one thing we want to make sure is that they love and help the children and help our teachers. That's more important than the money. This $50 payment is new. We received it for the first time last month.
Many of his former volunteers continue to help after they leave. Pala now uses Facebook to keep in touch and often receives donations directly. 10-year-old Saray Noir is grateful for the volunteers who work at her school.
I like them because they teach me to read and write in English, and I pay attention to them because I want to be like them. I don't feel sad because I know they have come to teach me and have to return home again. But I miss them a lot.
Our Child Welfare Ministry has a very big responsibility. We need to do all we can to ensure that the children of our country will be safe because they hold the future of Cambodia in their hands.
But now it's time for this volunteer to say goodbye.
I just want to say, over the past 3 months, I have enjoyed spending so much time with you. And I have truly grown to love you like you're my best friend. And I wish you so much luck and success in your life.
No matter how sad it is at the end, it's always worth the happiness that you give them while you're here, and by helping these kids we're not giving them everything they deserve because they're far from it, but we're helping them to be able to know what they deserve and stand up and ask for that themselves.
While Cambodian authorities continue to assess the pros and cons of volunteer tourism, the industry continues to grow. It may well be a form of travel that's here to stay.
That report by Kathy Hearn. And for more on the issue of volunteer tourism in Cambodia, we've come to the historic Angkor Wat World Heritage Site in Siem Reap. We're joined on the panel by Geraldine Cox, one of the few foreigners to have Cambodian citizenship and has been involved with orphanages for more than 30 years. Sopal Sia is the director of an NGO called Bamboo Shoot, an organization that promotes education for poorer children. And Michael Horton is a chairman and founder of a volunteer tourism organization called Concert. So Paul, if I could just start with you, how important are these volunteer tourists who come to Cambodia, who give up their time and help the community here?
Oh, it's quite important. The volunteer is good too because they really responsible. They really care because they understand the country really devastated by war. You know, like especially recent war, like during the 70s, especially in the Khmer Rouge region, they kill nearly all educated classes. So we also have a problem with human resources. So volunteers is important, even short term or long term, still good.
Michael, would you agree that this is what the volunteer tourists bring to Cambodia? Expertise?
Cambodia is recovering from many problems, and the children of Cambodia are recovering from many problems, and so any help that is given should not add to those problems. And so volunteers who come for a long time and who are properly supervised and are working, you know, in programs where there are proper curriculum, where they're following on from the previous volunteer, where the regular Khmer staff are the main contact with that child and not the volunteer, so that the volunteer is acting as a classroom assistant and controlled by the regular Khmer staff so that we minimise problems of attachment and emotional problems from children when those volunteers leave. Those are some of the things that should be in place.
Geraldine, is this the case here in Cambodia when it comes to volunteer tourism?
I find those short-term volunteers for my particular program disruptive and not really at all valuable. I've got some real horror stories of volunteers that have come for those short periods of time, backpackers who have smoked marijuana on the site. I've had volunteers with special dietary requirements where they want vegan and vegetarian food, and I'm saying, I'm sorry, there's the rice pot and there's the soup pot, there's no vegan pot. So some of them come, you know, wanting hot water and special food. I've had middle-aged volunteers, women that come whose husbands have run off with their secretaries, and they're on the road looking for the meaning of life, and just wanted to spend most of the day complaining about their husbands and half the night drinking red wine.
What does the community get out of this short-term volunteerism?
My special program is about young women leader. So most of my students really get inspired, because most of the volunteers come from the Western country. They know how to be strong women, independent, so they influence a lot, see, about women issues. So they learn a lot. Sometimes they can contact each other, something like that, see, because Khmer ladies mostly hard to expose themselves, see. When they got together with these volunteers, they feel confident. So I can see a lot of confidence.
But what about security clearance? How assured are you, Michael, that these volunteers really do have their community interests at heart?
Most volunteers don't come with the wrong motives.
But you only need one to do a lot of damage.
You do. Most don't come with the wrong motives.
And we are talking about people here who will be working with young children, orphanages.
There are real benefits from some volunteers. And for example, if you are a teacher, a professional teacher, people come and want to teach the children. And we say, why don't you go and teach the Cambodian teachers who are teaching the children?
Absolutely, yeah.
And then you can leave something behind. If you pass on your skills, if you're a nurse, teach the nurses. If you're a businessman, teach them some administration. So we always recommend and try where we can to get the volunteer to work with the staff.
Geraldine.
Also, in the beginning, when I was accepting almost any volunteer that worked on the place, many volunteers would come with their own English program. And then 1 month I'd have someone learning from this book, and then another month somebody would come from another book, and I had the kids being taught English by people with an Indian accent or a Filipino accent and a Scottish accent and a Swedish accent. So my kids were growing up with almost unintelligible English because of the different accents of all the teachers that were coming in. And with volunteers, it's very hard when they are giving you their time to say, well, look, I want you here at 8 o'clock and then you finish at 5 and these are your tasks during the day, because you're not paying them. And they say, oh, look, no, actually I want to go into the market for a few hours. So it's really hard to work out the day when the volunteer isn't really going to be there for 8 blocks of the day.
Well, because bottom line, they are tourists.
That's
they have
right.
paid to come
That's
to
right.
see the country,
Yeah,
and they want to help out the community
and
as
then
well.
I've had tourists come with their own agendas, with religious beliefs, where they feel it's their duty and their obligation to convert the children. And I think that's criminal in a country like this where Buddhism is their culture. If the children want to investigate Christianity when they're adults, that's fine, but I really don't think it's the right thing for Christians to come in and feel it's their right to convert people in this country, and that's something a lot of volunteers here do.
So, Paul, people say that volunteer tourism is like a human safari. You have rich Westerners who come here to Cambodia, perhaps to see what poverty is like, and perhaps even to pity Cambodians. How do you feel about this as a Cambodian?
Actually, it's true anyway, because we are really a certain country. We have rich culture and history. This is our pride, see, national. We're so proud about this. But this is also a good point that why tourists come here, because of Angkor Wat behind, you see, because of the culture. And then when they see the people, they really, of course, horrible, because we experience civil war, especially, and the young especially, they mostly suffer because the family background mostly also troubles, even the war and everything. So when tourism come, of course, they admire our cultures, and of course, the best is they love the people, because they see that the Khmer people are really friendly, and they love the children too, because everyone, especially from the poor background, they really determined for education. That's why this is really inspire those young from the West. They really like, they really like, because you are so struggling, you're starving, but you're still struggling for education. This is really inspired them, because they live in the Western world, so they feel they're very comfortable, you see.
Geraldine, is there an element of the human safari when it comes to volunteer tourism?
Yes, I think people coming here seek to be moved. I've had 2 or 3 occasions where volunteers have come and they haven't lasted the day because they're so moved by the children's stories, they're crying in front of the children, and that's not good for the children, and I've had to say, I'm sorry, you know, you can't stay. We also have had volunteers who come with very strong ideas, and they say, oh, well, look, we don't think you should run it like this, we think it should be run like that, and this is what you should be doing here and there. And they don't take direction, they want to change what you've already got in place. And I do know of many organisations that get great value out of the volunteer program, but unless you've got the resources to manage them and supervise them, it's very difficult to control. And again, my priority is the safety, welfare of the children, not to give the volunteers a nice experience.
And that's a point, Michael, that you've repeated several times here, where these volunteers need to be guided. There needs to be a proper organisation of their efforts. Is that happening here in Cambodia?
Not entirely, no. There are 300 NGOs in Siem Reap province, and if you have 300 of anything gathered together, you're going to have a range of quality, and there's a range of quality. And managing volunteers when they get here falls on the shoulders of people like Geraldine and her staff and people like Sopal and his staff. And volunteers really do assume many things, that what they're doing is going to be useful and that they're going to be managed in a proper way, and they look to the local people on the ground to manage them well. Volunteers can be really, really useful. It's all down to the management of them.
Geraldine, what do you think needs to be done to improve the management of these volunteers?
Well, I think each organisation that accepts volunteers needs to have firmly in place proper police checks of everybody, whether they're coming for 3 days or 3 months. I think there needs to be the local resources to show them around, to manage them and to supervise them, and not to let them go off and do their own programs.
So, Paul, what do you think can be done to actually improve volunteer tourism so that Cambodians can benefit from this?
At least you have to give them a brief orientation about the place, about what you have to do, what you could not do, you see? Something like that. Then people will be aware in advance, you see?
Michael, there have been reports that volunteers who come to Cambodia, who have paid organisations to try and help and give back to the community, but they've been ripped off. Have you heard of those sort of cases?
Yes, absolutely. And it's paying a volunteer organisation is like buying any other service. And I don't believe that there's anything wrong with paying a volunteer organisation to help you to find a suitable place to volunteer. And you know what I'm going to say, that's all part of the management. So if you pay $1,000, you should be made very aware of where all that money went. And some of that money legitimately goes to the overheads of that organisation.
How can a volunteer be assured that the money that they're giving to an organisation actually goes to the people that they're trying to help?
I would ask questions, and I'd want to see proof. I'd want to see an annual report, and I'd want to see a budget, and I would want to see proof. But a lot of young volunteers don't think that way. But it
want
should
to know where you're going. Where
Yeah.
do you fit into that program?
That's right.
Can you
Yep.
speak to volunteers that came before you?
Yeah.
Who will be supervising you? Are you actively put in touch with people that came before you and people that will come after you?
So, Paul, what about these volunteers who do pay organisations? Would you say that there is a rampant abuse of the system here in Cambodia? Are most organisations, do they
yes,
rip
a few
off the
cases.
tourists?
It's not all, yes, but so many good organizations they can do good too. But a few cases happen, and end up with very unsatisfactory expectation, you see, because people always expect good, you see, and it never happens.
It's a really volatile situation, because there are really, really good volunteers that make a difference, and it's the ones that don't that spoil it for the really, really good ones. That's just the way Cambodia is. You just need a few bad apples to ruin the whole basket.
I'm afraid we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you very much for being with us today. That's all the time we have for this edition of 101 East. You can always follow the program through our Facebook, website or podcast. From all the team here in Siem Reap, Cambodia, thanks for watching.